The shovel hit the dirt with a dull thud. Again and again. The sound echoed through the night, slow, rhythmic, almost calm. Karen's breath came in short bursts as she wiped sweat from her face, muttering, "Rules are rules. You shouldn't have broken them." Beneath the soil, a faint, desperate cry. A child's voice begged for air, for mercy. But Karen just smiled, her eyes wild in the moonlight. She pressed her foot against the dirt, burying the last trace of innocence beneath her garden. When I arrived home, the yard was empty. My daughter's wheelchair lay overturned, her doll face down in the mud. And then I saw it, Karen's backyard, the freshly turned earth. She thought she was covering up a problem. She thought she'd buried her secret forever. What she didn't know was that I'm an FBI agent, and she just buried herself. Before we begin, I want you to tell me something. Which city are you watching this story from? Drop it in the comments below right now. I love seeing how far our community reaches, and trust me, you'll want to stay till the very end of this one. And before we start, hit that subscribe button because today's story will chill you to your core. This isn't fiction. This is about how far one woman's madness went and how a father's hidden truth brought her to justice. It all started in a quiet suburban neighborhood, the kind of place that looks perfect from the outside. Green lawns, white fences, smiling neighbors who wave as you drive by. But behind those smiles lived Karen, the self-proclaimed queen of the HOA, a woman who believed the neighborhood belonged to her. Every rule, every sound, every blade of grass, she controlled it all. When I moved in with my daughter, I wanted peace. After a tragic accident left her disabled, all I wanted was a calm place where she could heal. But to Karen, my daughter's wheelchair ramp was an eyesore. Our medical equipment was a violation. And her laughter, the one thing that made our home feel alive again, was a disturbance. At first, I ignored her. I didn't want trouble. She didn't know who I really was, a federal agent working undercover, living quietly among civilians. I thought she was just another bitter neighbor. Until one day, my daughter disappeared. And that's when I learned what psycho really meant. Because Karen didn't just want control, she wanted silence. And she was willing to bury anything or anyone to get it. When we first moved into Willow Creek Estates, I thought I had finally found peace. After years of undercover work, violence, and betrayal, I needed quiet. Not for me, but for my daughter, Emily. She was only 9, but her small body had already endured more pain than most adults could imagine. A drunk driver had stolen her ability to walk, left her dependent on a wheelchair and round-the-clock medical support. The doctor said stability was crucial, both emotional and physical. So I chose Willow Creek, a gated community that advertised family values and neighborhood harmony. Harmony. That word would haunt me later. At first, everything seemed perfect. The lawns were green, the air smelled of pine and freshly cut grass, and the neighbors smiled like we'd stepped into a postcard. Every evening, I'd wheel Emily around the cul-de-sac. She'd point at the houses, laughing whenever she saw garden gnomes or barking dogs. For a few precious weeks, I believed we were safe. Then Karen introduced herself. It was a sunny Saturday morning. I was setting up Emily's portable ramp outside when a shadow fell across the driveway. "Excuse me," a voice said, sharp but sugar-coated. I turned. A woman in her late 40s stood there, perfectly groomed, wearing a floral blouse and an expression that screamed judgment disguised as courtesy. "I'm Karen, president of the HOA." She said it like a title, not an introduction. "Just wanted to welcome you and remind you about a few of our community standards." I smiled politely. "Appreciate that. I'm Daniel. My daughter and I just moved in." Her eyes flicked to Emily's wheelchair, her smile faltering for half a second before returning tighter. "Yes, I noticed. Such a unique situation. I'll be sure to inform maintenance about your ramp, though technically, exterior modifications need prior approval." "It's for accessibility," I replied calmly. "I've got the permits." "Oh, of course," she said, brushing imaginary dust from her sleeve. "We just like to make sure everything fits the neighborhood aesthetic." That was Karen's favorite word, aesthetic. It meant uniform lawns, matching mailboxes, and no visible reminders of imperfection. From that day on, she made herself known. Every morning she walked her dog past our house, same time, same route, pretending to check her phone while her eyes darted toward our porch. If I left Emily's medical oxygen cylinder outside for even a moment, a gentle reminder letter appeared in our mailbox the next day. All outdoor items must comply with HOA visibility rules. Please keep personal medical equipment out of sight. Thank you for your cooperation. Karen, HOA President. The first time I ignored it. The second, I called the HOA office. They apologized profusely and said, Karen gets a little overzealous. The third time, I decided to document everything. Old habits die hard, especially when you've worked for the Bureau. But I didn't want confrontation. Emily needed peace, not chaos. She'd ask about Karen sometimes. Daddy, why does the lady next door always frown when she sees me? I'd force a smile. She's just not used to meeting brave girls like you. She giggled. Then she should smile more. Smiling makes people nicer. If only that were true. The first big incident happened 2 weeks later. It was a Sunday morning, and Emily was painting on the porch. I'd left her with her nurse, Mia, while I ran inside to grab coffee. When I came back, Karen was standing on the sidewalk, arms folded, watching them. Is there a problem? I asked. She pointed to the small medical generator humming beside the porch. That thing makes noise. I can hear it during my morning yoga. It violates the decibel limit. It's a life support generator, I said evenly, and it's quieter than your lawnmower. She huffed. Rules are rules, Mr. Daniels. If we let one person bend them, others will follow. Next thing you know, this place will look like a hospital. Something inside me tightened. I wanted to tell her who I really was, that I'd spent years taking down people far more dangerous than her. But I didn't. Instead, I just said, I'll handle it, and guided Emily inside. After that, the letters doubled. Then came the phone calls, always anonymous, always complaints about noncompliance. I installed security cameras. My instincts told me this wasn't just nosiness anymore. It was obsession. Late one night, I checked the footage and froze. There she was, Karen, walking up our driveway at 2:13 a.m., flashlight in hand, peering through the window where Emily slept. The next morning, I confronted her. Karen, I've got you on camera. Stay off my property. Her face didn't flinch. I was checking for code violations. You left a hose uncoiled. That's a tripping hazard. I stepped closer. You come near my daughter again, and I'll make sure you regret it. Her smile was razor thin. Is that a threat? No, I said quietly. It's a promise. From that day forward, she escalated. She filed false noise complaints. She told neighbors I was unstable, that my daughter was a danger to herself. Someone started leaving dead flowers on our porch, a cruel mockery of condolence. Mia begged me to report it to the police, but I knew how that would go. Karen had influence here. She was charming, manipulative, and excellent at playing victim. Every HOA board member seemed afraid of her. So I played the long game. I documented every move, every word, every violation. If she crossed a legal line, I'd be ready. But Emily started noticing the tension. Her once bright smile dimmed. She stopped asking to go outside. Daddy, she whispered one night, why doesn't Miss Karen like me? I couldn't find the words. How do you tell a child that some people hate goodness simply because it reminds them of what they'll never have? One afternoon, I came home early from work. The air felt strange, heavy, quiet. Emily's toys were scattered in the yard, her wheelchair tipped on its side. The gate was open. Mia was inside, asleep on the couch. Where's Emily? I asked, panic rising. Her eyes snapped open. What? She was just outside drawing. We ran into the yard. Nothing. I shouted her name until my throat burned. No answer. Then, from the corner of my eye, I saw movement, Karen standing in her yard, calmly watering her roses. Have you seen my daughter? I yelled. She looked up, her expression as smooth as glass. No idea. Maybe she rolled off somewhere. My heart stopped. What did you say? Karen smiled faintly, twisting the hose nozzle shut. You should keep a better eye on her. These streets aren't safe for fragile people. Something in her tone froze my blood. My training screamed that she wasn't just cruel, she was taunting me. That night, I sat awake, staring at the security footage frame by frame. At 4:17 p.m., Emily was playing on the porch. By 4:19, she was gone. The camera glitched for 10 seconds, and in the faint reflection of a passing car window, I saw it. Karen's figure standing by our gate, something metallic in her hand. I leaned back, pulse pounding. This wasn't harassment anymore. This was the beginning of something far darker. And I swore, whatever she'd done, wherever she'd taken my daughter, I would find her. Even if I had to dig up the entire neighborhood myself. The sight of that overturned wheelchair will haunt me forever. It was lying there in the middle of the driveway, one of the wheels still spinning, slowly, like a clock ticking down to panic. Emily's doll was a few feet away, its pink dress smeared with dirt. And the worst part? The gate was open. I ran through the house shouting her name. Every room, every corner, empty. Her oxygen tubes were still coiled near her bed, her sketchbook half open on the table. A few pages fluttered under the ceiling fan. One had a drawing of a garden, Karen's garden. I grabbed my phone, called the nurse, and my voice came out like sandpaper. Where is she? I went to the kitchen for 2 minutes, she stammered. When I came back, she was gone. I thought you took her for a walk. The air seemed to vanish from the room. I burst through the door, shouting Emily's name until my throat burned. Neighbors peeked out, confused, murmuring. And there, across the street, stood Karen, arms folded, expressionless, watching. I stormed toward her. Where is she? Karen blinked innocently. Who? My daughter. She tilted her head, feigning confusion. You mean the one who's always outside making noise? Maybe she rolled away. Kids wander. I stepped closer, my voice low and shaking. If you touched her, I swear. Karen cut me off. Careful. Threatening an HOA member can lead to serious consequences. Then, with a thin smile, she added, maybe this is the universe correcting its mistake. I saw red. My fists clenched so tight my nails drew blood from my palms. But years of FBI training whispered in my mind, control, not chaos. I turned, ran back toward my house, and dialed 911. The police arrived 15 minutes later. I'd already checked every yard, every park, every camera on my property, nothing. Karen stood on her porch sipping tea as officers questioned me, pretending to be helpful. Oh, yes, officers, she said sweetly. I saw him searching everywhere. He seems unstable. Maybe he misplaced the child. I wanted to tear that mask right off her face. But instead, I let her talk. Because liars always hang themselves when you let them speak long enough. One officer finally asked, Sir, does your daughter wander off often? She can't walk, I said flatly. The look on his face told me he realized how stupid his question was. They searched the neighborhood for hours. Nothing. The sun went down and the world dimmed into panic. Around midnight, I went to Karen's side of the fence. Her backyard lights were off, but I could see fresh patches of disturbed soil near her flower beds, uneven, damp, darker than the rest. My heart pounded. I took a few photos with my phone, zoomed in. There, a small piece of pink fabric peeking through the dirt. Emily's dress. I felt my lungs freeze. I wanted to dig right then and there, but the FBI agent in me knew better. I needed evidence, not emotion. I went inside, locked every door, and opened my secure laptop. Within minutes, I'd accessed my restricted federal line and contacted a trusted friend, Special Agent Marcus Dean. Dean, I said, my voice hoarse, I need a discreet team, no questions asked. Missing child. My child. Possible abduction. Suspect. Female, late 40s, high-functioning sociopath named Karen Holt. Address incoming. He didn't ask anything else. On it, he said. 2 hours later, 3 unmarked SUVs pulled into the cul-de-sac, lights off. Karen's house was silent. I watched from my window as my team moved in soft steps, hand signals, night vision on. Dean motioned to me to stay back, but I followed. Quietly, we crept through her yard. The smell hit us first: damp soil, fertilizer, and something else. Dean crouched, brushing away the top layer of dirt with gloved hands. Then he froze. "Sir," he whispered, "you need to see this." There, half buried under less than a foot of soil, was Emily's necklace, the silver heart pendant I gave her on her 6th birthday. Something inside me broke. We started digging, fast but careful. Dirt flew, hearts raced, every second felt like a year. Then a muffled sound, a whimper, a cough. Wait, I heard something. Dean yelled. We dug faster, hands trembling. Then her face, pale, gasping, eyes wide with terror, appeared through the dirt. Emily, still alive. I pulled her out, cradling her against me, shouting for oxygen, blankets, anything. She was shaking uncontrollably, crying, trying to speak. She said I was the problem, Emily whispered weakly. She said she'd make me quiet. Those words will never leave me. The ambulance arrived within minutes. As they carried her away, I looked back at the mound of dirt, and standing at her back door, bathed in the porch light, was Karen, her face twisted in something between shock and denial. Our eyes met. She opened her mouth like she wanted to scream, but no sound came out. I took a step forward, voice steady and low. You buried my daughter alive. Karen's lips twitched. She shouldn't have been outside after dark, she muttered. It's against HOA rules. That was it. The final fracture in her mask. Get her, I said. Dean and his team moved in. Karen screamed as they cuffed her, her manic voice echoing across the street. You can't do this. I'm the HOA president. You people have no jurisdiction here. I walked up to her, held up my badge. The look in her eyes when she read the letters, FBI, was the first time I saw real fear in her. You're right, I said coldly. You don't live under HOA rules anymore. They loaded her into the car as neighbors gathered in their robes, whispering, filming. She shouted through the window, "You'll regret this. You're all against me." I was protecting the neighborhood. But no one answered. I followed the ambulance to the hospital. Emily's hands were still cold when I held them. The doctors said she'd been buried for less than 30 minutes, another 10, and she wouldn't have made it. When she finally opened her eyes, she looked up at me and whispered, "Daddy, it was so dark." I smiled through tears, brushing the dirt from her hair. You're safe now, sweetheart. No one will ever hurt you again. But deep inside, I knew this wasn't over. Because people like Karen, people who hide behind power, don't just live next door. They exist everywhere. And I was going to make sure the whole country saw what happens when one of them crosses the wrong man. The paramedics moved with the slow, precise urgency of people who see death and refuse to let it win. They wrapped Emily in thermal blankets, monitored her oxygen, and spoke in clipped, professional tones that somehow made the world feel smaller and steadier. I rode with her in the ambulance, my hands on the stretcher the whole way, whispering nonsense to keep her present. I've got you, you're stronger than this. Hold on, baby. Her eyes fluttered, but she didn't really look at me. She kept pressing her hand into mine like a lifeline. At the hospital, machines beeped, doctors conferred, and nurses moved like a sacred choreography. They did tests, flushed airways, and pumped warm fluids into her veins. Every minute stretched into an ache. Finally, one of the doctors stepped out, exhaustion written across his face. She's stable, he said, voice low. We caught her in time. She has hypothermia and some trauma, but she'll survive. You did the right thing getting her here so fast. Right thing. The words landed like a bomb and a blade at the same time. I kept replaying the digging, the frantic motion, the way wet soil caked under my nails, the smell of earth that would never leave my clothes. I remembered the tiny hand, the whisper in the dark. She had said she'd make me quiet. The sentence clung to me, heavy as lead. Detectives arrived within the hour. Even with my badge hanging on my belt, I let them do their job. There was a procedural dignity in formality, statements taken, the scene photographed, neighbors interviewed. Karen was sitting in a room at the precinct, manic and brittle, insisting she'd done nothing wrong, that perhaps I'd staged everything to embarrass the HOA. Her nails had dirt under them. Her clothes showed soil smears. The contradiction made her words brittle and hollow. I watched as they combed her yard again in daylight, this time officially. They unearthed evidence, a gardening fork with traces of tissue, fabric shreds, and, worst of all, dirt packed with small pieces of my daughter's blanket. The lab results would take time, but it was already a mosaic of proof. The video footage was the thing that made the neighborhood stop pretending. Someone from 2 houses down had the CCTV pointed toward the cul-de-sac, a grainy black and white feed that caught the tail end of Karen's movement that night. It was nothing cinematic. A shadow moving toward the side gate, a figure bending, a mound rising and settling. But when the clip circulated, people stopped in doorways, phones frozen mid-scroll. There was a sickening clarity. A woman who smiled at block parties, who chaired neighborhood barbecues, had, in the small hours, decided to bury a child. Emily was awake the next day, fragile and frightened. She blinked at the fluorescent light and whispered my name. When I told her the police had the woman, she squeezed my hand and let out a breath that seemed like the first safe exhale she'd taken in days. "Daddy," she asked softly, "did she hate me?" My chest tightened. How do you explain the small cruelties of the world to a child who needs only love? No, I said slowly, the truth complex and simple at once. She hated what she couldn't control. But you are loved, and she can't touch you anymore. The prosecutors moved quickly. With the physical evidence and witness corroboration, the case assembled like clockwork. I had to keep parts of my identity compartmentalized. The public narrative couldn't be muddied by my federal role. Still, the authorities treated the crime as what it was, a violent, premeditated act. Attempted homicide, kidnapping, child endangerment. The tabloids swirled for a few days, then receded, but the quiet aftermath was worse. A parade of interviews, child welfare evaluations, and the invasive curiosity of people who wanted to understand how a neighborhood monster could exist in plain sight. We rebuilt our home's sense of safety slowly. Locks were upgraded. Cameras replaced the ones that had been tampered with. A neighbor organized a schedule, so Emily never spent time alone outside again. People brought casseroles and blankets and letters. Many came with tears and confessions. We wished we had asked more questions. We thought she was odd but harmless. We're sorry we didn't do more. Their apologies held genuine shame, and while they could not undo that night, they were not empty. In the quiet moments, the small, ordinary silences between hospital visits and legal meetings, I replayed the why. Why would someone reduce another human being to a problem to be hidden? Why would the sight of a wheelchair stir such violent venom in another adult? The rational side of me cataloged motives: power dynamics, control, projection. The father inside me felt something else. Sorrow that a mind could travel to such a dark place and find comfort there. Emily healed with the stubbornness of children who choose hope. There were nightmares, of course. The dark would sometimes drag her back, and she'd wake gasping, fingers clawing for me. Each time I'd hold her through it until dawn, and each time the nightmares lost more ground. Her laughter returned first in small sounds, a crooked giggle at a cartoon, then broader, louder. Her resilience was humbling. She refused to be defined by fear. Courtroom proceedings were brutal and necessary. I sat through testimonies describing the excavation, the hours before she was found. Neighbors recounted seeing Karen in her garden late, at night, her hands in soil, humming to herself. The defense tried to paint her as confused, a woman who'd lost perspective. The prosecutor read emails and search queries discovered on her computer, phrases like, "How long can someone survive buried shallow?" and "How to hide a body in garden, cold, clinical, terrifying." The jury learned what we had learned in the small hours. This was not a heat-of-the-moment thing. It was planned. When the verdict came, the courtroom exhaled as one. Guilty on multiple counts. The judge's sentences were measured but final. In those long weeks of testimony and cross-examination, the world watched a strange transformation. Karen's public face disintegrated into a private ruin. Her neighbors, those who once deferred to her authority, now avoided her eyes. The HOA she had built on fear unraveled publicly, membership dropping as people reevaluated the cost of quiet compliance. Emily was discharged with a list of follow-ups, counseling, medical checks, and a careful, loving reintroduction to the outdoors. We planted a small garden by her window, sunflowers mostly bright and stubborn. She helped water them with a tiny can, and watching her coax life out of soil that once threatened her felt like a small, fierce reclaiming. There are days when I still wake in the dark, reliving that mound, the dirt in my hair, the frantic digging. But there are more mornings now where I wake to her laugh drifting up the stairs. That sound anchors me. It reminds me why I dug, literally and figuratively, to bring her back. It reminds me why, when power wears a smile and a list of bylaws, someone has to stand and say no. This chapter ended with her alive and breathing and with the woman who nearly took her life behind bars. But the damage to trust, to innocence, to the illusion of safety takes longer to heal. Still, each sunflower that lifts its face to the sun is a small victory. Each time Emily draws a picture of herself in the garden, it's a declaration. Life wins. The trial had ended, but something inside me refused to rest. Justice had been served. Yes, but it felt incomplete. There were still unanswered questions, pieces of the puzzle that didn't fit. Why had no one intervened sooner? Why had the HOA board ignored all the warning signs? And why did Karen, even after conviction, keep smiling like she still held some secret power? For weeks, that smirk haunted me. I'd see it every time I tried to sleep, that cold, painted grin that said I still win. One morning, a letter arrived at my office, unmarked, hand-delivered. Inside was a single photograph, my daughter, Emily, at the hospital window. The back had 2 words written in sharp ink, "You're welcome." I froze. The handwriting, perfectly neat, sharp slants, was hers. Karen's. I checked the return logs. No visitor approvals, no mail stamps. The letter had been dropped inside the secure floor of the federal building where I worked. Only authorized personnel could enter. That was when the old instinct, the one buried beneath months of fatherly pain, returned. The agent in me reawakened. That same evening, I went back to the neighborhood. Most houses were quiet now. The HOA had dissolved, and people barely waved anymore. But Karen's house, it looked almost untouched. The authorities had taped it off after the trial, but no one wanted to go near it. I entered carefully, flashlight in hand. The air was stale, the smell of rot and something chemical. Her study was exactly how I remembered it. Clean, symmetrical, obsessively organized. Stacks of HOA files lined the walls, color-coded and labeled. I pulled open one drawer and stopped breathing. Inside were folders on every single resident. Photos, notes, personal details, even the smallest violations, all documented meticulously. But my file was different. It was thicker. I opened it slowly. Inside were pictures of Emily playing in the yard, sleeping near the window, even inside our home. And clipped to one of them was an article printout. FBI agent receives state honor for anti-corruption operation. My face was circled in red ink. Underneath, she'd written in block letters, liar, fraud, danger to society. She knew. She'd found out before the night she buried Emily. She knew who I was and still tried to destroy me. Not out of ignorance, but out of defiance. That discovery flipped everything. She hadn't been targeting weakness. She'd been waging war against authority itself, against the system that once protected people from her kind. I called my partner, Agent Dean. "You were right," I said quietly. She wasn't just a sociopath, she was organized. She had information no civilian should. He was silent for a long time. Then he said, "Check for digital backups." Someone fed her intel. That night, we swept the house again, this time with federal warrants. Hidden behind a false wall in her study, we found a small safe. Inside, encrypted flash drives, letters from other HOA presidents, and payments, small, consistent wire transfers from a private developer firm. She'd been helping them. Karen's obsession with control had been fueled by money, bribes for perfect neighborhoods, deals with real estate groups that wanted to push out undesirable residents to raise property values. My daughter, disabled and visible, had become an obstacle to profit. I felt physically sick. Over the next week, the case expanded from a single act of violence into a full-scale federal investigation. We uncovered at least 5 similar HOAs across the state, all tied to the same network, all with presidents like Karen enforcing their own little dictatorships. Each one had used harassment, eviction threats, and property sabotage to pressure families into leaving. Karen wasn't just a monster. She was a cog in something far uglier. When I visited her in the state facility, she looked almost calm. Her hair was shorter, her eyes hollow but steady. "You wanted to see me?" I asked, sitting across from her. She smiled faintly. "I see you found my files." I didn't answer. "You think I'm crazy," she continued, "but I only did what everyone wanted. People don't want reminders of imperfection. They want order, beauty, control." I leaned forward. "You buried a child alive." She tilted her head. "And yet you still came here. You needed to understand me." I met her gaze, voice quiet but sharp. "No, I came to watch you fade." Her smile cracked, but only slightly. "You can't kill what people secretly love, Agent Hayes. I'm not the problem, I'm the mirror." That line stuck with me long after I left. Maybe she was right, in a way. Maybe she was the reflection of something we'd all ignored, the cruelty that hides behind social perfection. Back home, Emily was recovering faster than doctors expected. She'd started drawing again, mostly gardens, but in every drawing, the soil was bright green, not brown. When I asked her why, she said, "Because I want to make the ground nice again. It's not bad anymore." Her innocence disarmed me. Even after everything, she chose to see beauty. A month later, our findings went public. News stations called it the HOA syndicate scandal. Dozens of arrests followed. The Justice Department launched reforms to regulate residential associations nationwide. Karen's name became infamous, a symbol of how control can rot into cruelty. But for me, the real closure came one evening as I watched Emily sleep, her chest rising and falling peacefully. The same sound that once terrified me, the quiet rhythm of her breathing, now felt like victory. Karen had tried to bury my daughter, but in doing so, she exposed something bigger, a truth about how far darkness can go when hidden behind respectability. I looked out the window, the moonlight spilling over the yard. The flowers Emily planted were blooming lilies, roses, daisies. Life where death had once been. And I whispered to the night, not out of vengeance, but out of truth, "You were wrong, Karen. Control doesn't win. Love does." Then I turned off the light, closed the blinds, and finally, after months of nightmares, slept. The investigation grew faster than anyone expected. What started as one woman's crime in a quiet suburb had unraveled into something systemic, a chain of HOAs functioning like private regimes, each with its own Karen, each fueled by greed and pride. And at the center of it all was a corporate front. The Urban Harmony Development Group, a company that bought land cheap by quietly driving out undesirable residents. Disabled children, elderly tenants, single parents, anyone who didn't fit their glossy brochure image of perfection. When the FBI task force went public with the findings, the news exploded. Headlines blared. HOA extortion ring tied to real estate giant. FBI agent's daughter survives horror that exposes nationwide scam. For the first time, Karen's name wasn't just a meme or a local scandal. It became a symbol of everything wrong with power without empathy. And yet, I didn't feel triumph. Even after all the arrests, after dozens of HOA presidents and corporate executives were marched into courtrooms, I couldn't shake the image of Emily, half buried, gasping for air. No amount of legal victory could undo that sound that night. Still, the work had to be done. Justice isn't about feelings, it's about prevention. Our team spent months mapping every link, bank accounts, email threads, encrypted communications between HOA heads. Karen's encrypted drives turned out to be gold mines. Detailed instructions on how to file strategic violations against residents to pressure them into selling their homes at lower prices. She'd been the model enforcer, the queen bee of HOA control. When the sentencing hearings began, I was asked to testify again, not just as a victim's father, but as the lead investigator who'd uncovered the network. Standing in that courtroom, I could feel the eyes of the press on me. Cameras clicked, but I didn't look at them. I looked at Karen. She sat in the defendant section, pale and thin now, hands folded tightly in her lap. She didn't look like the tyrant I once faced. She looked small. I took the oath, then spoke the truth. Not just about what she'd done to Emily, but about what she represented, a culture that worships control and mistakes cruelty for order. When you give power to the wrong kind of people, I said, they don't build communities. They build cages. And when those cages start to break, they destroy whatever doesn't fit inside them. The courtroom was silent. Even the judge looked shaken. When the final verdict came, it felt like an ending years in the making. Karen was sentenced to life imprisonment without parole. The corporations funding her schemes faced massive fines and shutdowns. Several HOA executives accepted plea deals and testified, naming other communities where similar harassment had driven families to bankruptcy and worse. It wasn't just punishment, it was exposure. And yet, there was one final moment I'll never forget. After the verdict, as guards prepared to escort her out, Karen turned her head toward me. For a second, our eyes met, the same cold, gray eyes that once looked down on my child as if she were nothing. But now there was no arrogance, no pride, just a hollow emptiness, as if she'd finally realized what she'd lost. She whispered something. No one else heard it, but I did. I just wanted control. And that was it, her truth, small and pathetic. Control had been her religion, her addiction. And it had cost her everything. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Flashbulbs, microphones, the chaos of headlines forming in real time. Agent Hayes, is it true you were undercover when this started? Do you think justice was served? What's next for you and your daughter? I gave one statement. Just one. Justice isn't about revenge. It's about making sure monsters like her never get to smile in silence again. Then I walked away. Emily was waiting for me at home. The wheelchair gleamed in the sunlight, a small pot of daisies balanced on her lap. She looked up and grinned. Daddy, are the bad people gone? I knelt beside her. Most of them, I said. Some are still learning. She thought about it for a moment, then nodded. Can we plant more flowers now? That simple question, that innocent desire to create instead of destroy, broke me in the best way. I smiled through tears. Yeah, sweetheart. As many as you want. We spent that evening in the garden, hands in the dirt, the same earth that had once nearly taken her from me. Now, it was something else entirely. Every seed we planted felt like defiance, like life reborn. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I looked up at the sky. For the first time in months, it didn't feel heavy. Later that night, as I tucked Emily in, she asked softly, Daddy, do you think she's sorry now? I hesitated, then said, maybe. But sorry doesn't change what people do. What changes the world is what we do after. She smiled sleepily. Then we'll make it better. Those words, pure, unwavering, echoed in my mind long after she fell asleep. The case had closed, but a new mission had begun. The FBI launched a special task force focused on HOA abuse and housing discrimination. They named it Project Harmony, Emily's suggestion. She even helped design its logo, a flower blooming through cracked concrete. Sometimes, justice isn't about punishment. It's about what grows in the ruins. And as I watched her sleep that night, I realized Karen had buried my daughter alive to silence her existence. But all she'd done was plant the seed of a movement. And this time, the whole world was watching it bloom. 6 months after the last verdict, the world had moved on, headlines replaced, news cycles turned. But for me, time still felt split into 2 parts, before and after. Before the dirt, before the shovel, before the quiet horror of that night when the ground itself became my enemy. And after, when silence began to heal, when my daughter's laughter finally filled the empty spaces again. Sometimes I still wake up at 3 a.m., the memory playing like a broken film reel, the soft hum of sprinklers, the sound of soil being disturbed, and the ghostly whisper of Karen's voice. Rules are rules. Those 4 words used to mean order. Now they sound like a curse, the echo of power without empathy. But out of that darkness came something greater. Something neither she nor anyone like her could ever bury: truth. Every week since the case broke, my office receives letters from families across the country, people who faced harassment, bullying, or discrimination under the same HOA laws. Mothers who were fined for wheelchair ramps. Veterans threatened with eviction over therapy dogs. Parents of autistic children told to keep the noise down. For years, they thought they were powerless. Now, they know better. Emily's story gave them a voice. The Project Harmony task force expanded faster than we dreamed. By spring, it had filed over 200 charges against HOAs that operated like private kingdoms. Communities across the nation began rewriting their bylaws, not for aesthetics, but for humanity. And it all began with a little girl who refused to give up, who survived being buried alive and came back blooming like the flowers in her garden. One afternoon, we were invited to speak at a national forum on housing rights. I didn't want to go, not because I was afraid, but because I didn't trust my voice to hold steady. Emily, of course, insisted. "People need to hear," she said, adjusting her sunflower hair clip, the one she wore on that night when everything changed. So we went. The room was full: journalists, lawmakers, activists, victims. Emily sat beside me in her wheelchair, microphone trembling slightly in her small hand. "My name is Emily," she began softly, "and I'm not supposed to be here today." But my dad didn't stop digging. The audience was silent. Some people cried openly. Others bowed their heads. She continued, "I don't hate Miss Karen. I feel sorry for her. She forgot that people aren't problems, they're stories. And sometimes stories are messy, but that's what makes them real." Even I couldn't hold back tears. In her innocence, she said what I'd been struggling to say all along: that justice isn't just about punishing evil. It's about remembering goodness. After her speech, a senator approached me. "Your daughter may have changed more than a law," he said quietly. "She may have changed hearts." That night, as we drove home, Emily watched the sunset through the window. "Daddy," she said softly, "the sky looks like it's healing." I smiled. "Yeah, baby, it does." And it hit me then: healing isn't about forgetting. It's about remembering differently. Remembering not the pain, but the purpose. I often go back to that garden behind Karen's old house. The place that once smelled of rot now carries the scent of wildflowers. The new homeowners, kind people, let us visit whenever we want. Emily always kneels there, places one small flower in the soil, and whispers, "See, Daddy? Life wins again." Every time she says that, I feel something inside me shift, the old anger melting into something cleaner. People still ask if I forgive Karen. The truth? I don't know if forgiveness is the right word. She showed me the ugliest face of humanity, but she also reminded me of why compassion must exist. Without monsters, we forget how important it is to stay human. So maybe I don't forgive her, but I thank her. Not for what she did, but for what it made me realize: that love, no matter how broken, is stronger than hate. If you're watching this right now, wherever you are, in a small town, a big city, a quiet street that feels safe, remember this: monsters don't always hide in the dark. Sometimes they host block parties, they wave politely, they chair meetings. But you can still stop them, not with rage, but with courage. Speak up when something feels wrong. Protect the ones who can't protect themselves. Don't wait until tragedy knocks. Because silence protects the oppressor. Voice protects the victim. And if you ever find yourself doubting whether one voice can make a difference, think of a little girl named Emily, buried beneath the soil, whispering through the dirt, and still being heard. Today, she runs a small foundation, Lily's Light, named after the garden she planted to honor every child who's been hurt by cruelty. The foundation helps families fight housing discrimination, provides legal aid, and builds accessible playgrounds across the country. She says she wants to make places where everyone belongs. And I've stepped away from undercover work. I spend my days with her, helping, teaching, planting. Because after years of chasing evil, I've finally learned that the greatest victory isn't destroying darkness. It's choosing to build light. Karen once told me, "You can't control everything, And she was right. You can't control what people do, but you can control who you become after they do it. So, if you've made it this far, I want to leave you with this. Be the person who digs. The one who doesn't look away when something's wrong. The one who refuses to bury the truth, no matter how deep it's been hidden. Because sometimes the smallest act of courage, a voice, a hand, a heart, can save a life. Emily was buried by cruelty, but she was resurrected by love. And in the end, that's what this story really is, not about death or revenge or rules, but about rebirth. Because no matter how deep they try to bury the light, love always finds a way to bloom. And that's where our story ends. But maybe it's where your awareness begins. Sunflower, if Emily's courage touched your heart today, don't let it stop here. Comment below and tell me what city you're watching from. I love seeing this community of truth seekers grow across the world. If you believe no child should ever be silenced, share this video so more people hear her story. Awareness is how we stop the next Karen before she acts. And before you go, hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell because every week we uncover another true story that reminds us how powerful compassion can be, even in the darkest places. This is your host, reminding you, dig for truth, stand for kindness, and never bury the light. See you in the next story.